and get started. But some of you, I think almost all of you, we've seen you.
Uh-oh.
Amy, you're freezing up. I don't know if your Wi-Fi, so I don't know if Tim wants to take over.
Yeah, Amy, you've frozen. Are you there? Can you hear us? No.
Oh, no.
What's it?
Oh, you're back. You're back. There you go. You're back.
I'll make it short and sweet then, in case I'm going in and out. Just thanks to everybody who's here. Thanks to Tim Williams, who's my partner in crime and co-host, and cdavid, Michelle. Thank you for joining us on this, which is our 7th edition. And as many of you know, that we are doing this to have a great cross section of folks from the film and new media and television industry that see themselves as creators and creatives. We have a lot of industry folks, some folks from our board, as well as donors and funders who are trying to find ways to help us through this, and I mean that collectively. So as always, we usually are going to start at the top, probably 15 minutes this time, talking with our guests, and Tim's really going to take the lead on that. But if you have questions, you can add it into the chat function on the side, and after those 15, we're answering the questions that are in the chat that are putting all of this together each week, and she also is taping this. So, make sure that you're asking smart questions and looking good for your mom this weekend, because we sent it out to 112,000 people afterwards. So just, be on point. And thank you. Thanks everybody for continuing to be here. And for those of you who are new, welcome. Tim, take it away.
Yay, thank you very much. Yes, and thanks for hosting this. And as I said, if you haven't heard it already, buy your tickets to Spaceship Earth, please, tonight from Northwest Film Center, because it opens tonight and tickets are available and it should be really good. It was at Sundance, so do that because it helps the film center and it's a good movie. Double your money. All right. cdavid and Michelle, thank you both for joining us here. This is sort of just a casual conversation overall with a cross-section of filmmakers and a cross-section of creators out there. And I sort of wanted, we thought it would be really interesting for you both to not only talk about, your sort of your own background, but also where your organizations, both the Screen Actors Guild and SAG-AFTRA and the IATSE and the International, both local, how that's fitting into the landscape at the moment, and the things you guys have been doing during this time to promote your members, to promote the industry, to help your members and to help the industry, and to sort of put us as an industry sort of in the spotlight, both here in Oregon and at the federal level. So I think we'll find that the first 15 minutes is going to go really fast. So what I'll do is let's start with Michelle. Michelle, why don't you sort of talk a little bit about you, a little bit about SAG-AFTRA, and a little bit about what's been going on during this period with you and with SAG-AFTRA, and how you guys have been navigating it for yourself and for the members here in the region.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So I originally was years and years ago in the Portland market, was a fitness model, retired because I thought I was getting too old. And then I decided that I wanted to start acting. And so at the time, so many auditions were happening on Craigslist that probably dates me a little bit now. But the first 4 auditions I went on, I got booked, I got hired. And so I thought, well, I don't completely suck then, I suppose. And from there, just continued to get booked, and eventually got a couple union. I think I first started with a union commercial, and then ended up on different shows. And then the other half of my life, I'm in the fitness industry. And so I was a trainer for Everlast for shadow boxing, and I was a competitive speed skater. So that naturally ended up wrangling me into doing stunt work. So I did stunt work for, have been doing that, as well as acting, going back and forth, trying to go over more back to the acting side because it's less painful. And my husband's also a stunt coordinator and stunt performer. And then, so I was union, decided I wanted to get more involved. So I ran for the board. And my first session on the board, our president, Robert Blanche, was very ill. We lost him this last January, and very, very sorely missed in our community. He was a huge part of it. And when it was clear he was not going to be able to come back and finish out his term, I talked with him and decided to run, got his blessing, so to speak, and decided to run for president. And in my fitness life, I ran 80 fitness clubs across the United States. So this was a good way to start being able to boss people around again. So, no, just kidding. And then I've had great partnership with cdavid. We ran, some of you may have attended, we ran a huge safety on set event that covered all gamuts of production. And that was really great. And he'll probably talk on that too, as we had so many people say, wow, I never knew this about another department, that you thought about safety this way, or these are things that you do. And it was really great to have that crossover. So I think that relationship has led into what's going on right now very well, in that A, we work together very well, and B, we already understand, we're already digging into how all the different departments cross over to each other in a safety aspect. So now we can apply a lot of what we learned from that into how we're working with everyone on the task force and Tim to decide, what does the future look like for us for filming. In terms of SAG-AFTRA, on a national level, our president has been working with Congress, having conversations with Nancy Pelosi. This next Tuesday, IATSE and SAG-AFTRA have a town hall with Adam Schiff. So they were very much, both of our unions were very much behind trying to get the 1099 workers, the small business owners that also get W-2s in, to get covered by the CARE Act, and just a multitude of uncovering different ways for people to get financial help, mental health help, medical help, just everything along the way. And I think I covered everything, Tim.
You did, thank you. It was a good segue, actually, because that's the thing that I think I've appreciated the most at this point in time, from SAG as well as from IATSE, and moving over to cdavid, this idea that you have as individuals, local individuals, been able to get us a voice in sort of a larger field. And cdavid, I know you've done a lot of work on an individual level with members, not only just members, but people working in this industry. And you've been connecting that back out to the national level as well as the international level, and down in Los Angeles. And I've very much appreciated how that has, how we've been represented in that. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about not only how you got here, but that process of sort of keeping our industry, our local industry, in that spotlight.
Sure. Thanks for having me. By trade, I'm a property master, and came up through theater doing props, and actually started out as assistant stage manager and moved into props, and been in props ever since, in theater, and then moved into film and commercial work, and eventually into long form, and been mainly doing episodic here, before getting on the board and then becoming 2 years ago the one of our business agents. Our local covers, if you don't know, almost the entire Pacific Northwest, 4 states anyway. We cover Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. And primarily the work, as you all know, is in Washington and Oregon. What my approach has always been one of looking at the whole ecosystem. We have a unique community here in Oregon and throughout in between Oregon and Washington, and we're expanding our community and bringing some people into the fold, and not just in the union, but just reaching out to them in Montana and Idaho more these days. But that ecosystem approach includes and acknowledges that we don't have enough union work here for our members to survive on just that alone. And so our members are allowed to work on independent films, to work on non-union commercials and non-union projects. Unlike SAG-AFTRA, where they have a prohibition, we are able to do that. And so I've always been concerned, and I've been sort of led by our international president, Loeb. One of his messages always is that we represent all workers in the entertainment industry, union, non-union. So as Michelle said, going back to what she was talking about with the safety, that safety element has always been a big part of my drive in training and making sure our folks have the appropriate certifications. We have an OSHA 10 general entertainment safety class we teach, and we're looking to teach an OSHA 30 class to possibly deal with some issues with this COVID crisis. And that bringing together everyone that we did a year ago, April, was really fantastic, getting all levels of the community. As far as the legislative stuff, I think it's been great to see the response from our not only our governor, the governor's office has been great through this, and having access there, and I was able to get access there through using my channels through labor. So the Oregon AFL-CIO was able to get me in touch with one of the key people in workforce development there, and just talk over our initial concerns about being included in the conversation in our industry, and being able to go through with him and tell him about how our industry is not only one that can get up and going right away when we have the clearance and we have all the safety stuff in place, but we can also be a driver for the whole state, in that we have this interconnectivity that Tim and I have talked about a lot, with the hospitality industries and with some industries that have been hit really, really hard, the hotels, travel. Our industry pumps so much direct spending into those industries every year when we are up and running, that we are a significant, we have that significant interconnectivity. And again, going back to the ecosystem is bigger than just the filmmakers. The ecosystem goes to the vendors, goes to the mom and pop lumber store that we get hardware from, and the restaurant that serves our crew meals, or the catering company. So I've been able to work with Tim, and Oregon. I'm also on the board of Oregon Media Production Association, and so I've been there as sort of a voice of the workers, to provide the worker perspective, and more so than just the union perspective. The union concerns are going to get worked out with our contracts. It's been more an opportunity to expand our reach into the ecosystem and to demonstrate what the union's about, but also just to bring that message of solidarity out into all of our work and the whole region. And we've been able to work with Tim and OMPA and stakeholders to develop these new sets of protocols for COVID that I think will help us spring forward when we can. And those conversations will be ongoing until the day that we start, I know. But it's been really great to put those together and then be able to feature those on the state level, and then share them between Oregon and Washington, so that the states are working together in our industry. And then beyond that, taking it up to our international and having that message of what we're doing. And a lot of locals are doing this around the country, and a lot of groups of unions are doing this around the country, or ecosystems around the country are doing this, and putting that message forth so that our international can take it to the conversations with SAG-AFTRA and the other entertainment unions and guilds, and beyond that, our international president can take it to the legislature and get improvements in the CARES Act, as Michelle was talking about earlier. So that kind of gives you an overview, I think. That cover it, Tim?
Yeah. It's funny, on a personal level, I've been a member of SAG, Michelle, since 1987, and never done anything, but I still have my membership, and I've always found it to be something that I can never get rid of. And see, David, I think I told you this, but when I was a very young producer, almost around that same time, the person who actually guided me through my very first IATSE contract on a small movie was Matt Loeb in New York.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And he was very much, you're right. He was very much a sort of holistic, here's how we can make this work. And he was one of the first people, and I was really appreciative of this, in New York, because New York is it can be a very tough town on the union side, and very hard to not only break into, but to work in as a small producer, which I was at the time. And Matt was really good at just sort of guiding our company through it. And when we did the first movie, making sure when we made a mistake, he didn't, he helped us get through it rather than scream at us or something like that. And I've always appreciated that. And to this day, my membership in SAG and his guidance from the IA when I was a young producer in New York, it meant a great deal in terms of how I look at what you say is sort of the that we're all in this together, that there is this is a community, and this community, whether you're a member or not of any of these unions, it all bounces off each other. And our health is determinant of the very smallest production all the way up to the very largest production. And the more we have a singular voice that is then utilized at all those levels, the better it is across the board. So I'm very appreciative of that. And I think, you know, I think people, when they first start working with unions in producer or director capacity, it's always tricky because there are things you want to do that you probably can't do because of one rule or the other, and you have to learn how to make that happen. And that is a process, but it shouldn't be a scary process. It should be a productive process. So I've always appreciated that. I'm conscious that it's a little after 4:15 and almost 4:20. So I know, Amy, you wanted to go to some questions here, but I don't see any questions here yet. But if people have questions, either write it in the chat or raise your hand. You can wave at me, and we'd be happy to sort of approach them now.
And Tim, can I say something?
Yeah.
So in terms of, you know, union work, and particularly in this situation where healthcare is such a big factor for everyone, just so you guys know that for SAG-AFTRA members qualify by how much work that you get, because every job pays into our pension and health. And so one of the things that's really challenging that we run into is, especially if you look at women over 50, you're gonna, if you've been in the industry and you've been a professional, you're gonna be union. And if you can't get enough union work, you're not gonna get your health care. And so that's why it's really important that, you know, we all work together. It's when you think about doing a little more paperwork, making sure you have insurance, which protects your butt just as much as it protects ours, and doing that little bit of paperwork. And yes, sometimes paying a little bit more, sometimes not. And there's so many contract things. Just remember, you're also contributing to helping other professionals attain their health care.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Michelle, because I think in the absence of not seeing any specific questions, which again, feel free to type them in the chat at any time and we'll get to them. But I'm glad you brought up the sort of variance of contracts that SAG-AFTRA has, and that you guys are, you know, because actors are so critical to anything we're doing, whether it's scripted or not, you guys have had a pretty broad spectrum. And I know cdavid, the IATSE does too, but can you talk a little bit about the sort of lower budget, how the access points? I know a lot of people have worked under SAG-AFTRA, but many people might not have. So what are the touch points for some of the smaller productions?
So there's two basic sides of the house. There's the commercial side, and then there's the indie and feature side. So we run anywhere on the commercial side, from national commercials, on all venues and streaming and everything, all the way down to made in, played in, which can be a region under the regional code, which, for example, it's a local company. It's only going to play in Oregon. It's only going to play for a certain amount of time. There's tons of different options that make that very affordable. The other thing that really changed this last year is the ability to prepay residuals, so that you don't have to track it. You can say, I'm going to buy made and played, and so it can play in the whole Pacific Northwest. It can go for a year, and so you have different tiers that you can choose, and that way you don't have to go back and manage the residual process. That's happened on the national level as well, and we had a lot of national signatory advertising come back and be like, oh my gosh, this so simplifies our process. We can pay up front. We don't have to do all the tracking of residuals. Awesome. And we had a lot of people come back. I think first quarter was a 16 or 19% increase in commercial revenue because of that. On the other side of it, with indie productions, are anywhere from things that cover festivals. We covered the 48-hour film festival this year, which was so much fun. And I was thinking about the other day is I hope that we're able to do something like that again this summer. Anywhere from the film festivals to college projects or student film projects, to small film up to the small under 50,000, all the way up to big features. There's every level across the board. And I know, at least on the call, I know Devin, Laura, and Jackie, I think, have all worked with some of those contracts as well. So
yeah. Well, Devin actually put a question in here. Do you see anything changing post-COVID? I know there was an article out the other day about SAG-AFTRA's sort of response to how fast people come back to work and what the membership might be. Do you see anything like rates changing or work days or changing or anything like that in a post-COVID
Right.
world?
So right now, negotiations are actually going on with the AMTPT, which is our big negotiating with the producers. So that is happening. And you know what? Things are happening in ways that we never thought was possible. My dog's cuddling up to me here. She we don't know where this is going to end up. And I'm sure you've all read a lot of the articles that are talking about taking the whole cast and everyone's quarantined and everyone stays at a hotel. And background is not something that's really used for a while, and day players go away, and people, you know, so no one knows exactly what this is going to look like. So, I mean, at the very least, what you can expect is that the rates as they are will be there. We may just have other things that have to come out on if you are quarantining people before they go to set or the test. There's so many factors in, and it's changing daily. As those of us who've been working on the task force know, we don't know what it's all going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And see, David, maybe that's a good point for you to talk a little bit about some of the safety protocols that you've seen, not only that we've talked about here in the state that we're starting to see, but also sort of nationally, those things, you know, whether it's the pods or whether it's the cleaning surfaces, or what are the things you see coming through that most productions, you know, from a medium size up might have to deal with?
Right. I think the guidance from IATSE was really good and well put together, because they started right at the top and they said every production producer needs to think about having somebody trained as a COVID-19 sort of workplace supervisor, whether that's for your whole company, if you're a smaller production company, or whether that is for a particular project. So somebody who has what they were recommending was like an OSHA 30 level of training. That's a 30-hour training in OSHA protocols. And so we're trying to develop those people in our region right now. I have an OSHA trainer trying to get that training together and as fast as possible get some of our people trained so that they can serve on union and non-union productions, and at least be available for you know, site survey of a location. Maybe you don't have one on full time, but maybe you use that person and their knowledge to sort of run through your production schedule and say, here's where the hot points are going to be. So anyway, I've appreciated IATSE's approach, because their approach was not a detailed, like, this is what you have to do. It was more like, these are the questions you should be asking. So you should be looking at, you know, at job hazards and job hazard assessment, and they gave you a set of questions for that. And OMPA has released those protocols, and one of the addendums has that set of questions on it. It's a really good set of questions for a production company, a producer, or a single one-off production to go through, no matter what your level of production is. And so I've appreciated that. And I think that, like I said, it all centers around how you're thinking about, how you're talking about all of the things that could happen on the day, and how much you can think ahead of time will set you up for success. So really planning that out and having that COVID-19 workplace supervisor, or, you know, somebody who's designated in your team to be taking the helm on that. And maybe that's the person that, if you're a small production, is also screening temperatures at the top of the day, or, you know, making sure that your protocols that you set up as your company are followed. One of the things that we really felt was important in these protocols, though, was getting everybody's involvement, because obviously the crew has a different eye on their daily activities than the producer. And that's really where the conversation needs to happen now. We've given people sort of the basis. IATSE's given the basis. SAG-AFTRA will be providing more input, and the AMTP will also be providing input that will guide our industry. But the conversation should be starting now, because one of the things I was on a phone call or a Zoom call with some of our makeup people today, and a big issue is this supply chain of PPE, of protective equipment, and how can we start now to build that supply chain so that we start collecting the things that we absolutely know we will need. the disinfectants, the hand cleaner, hand sanitizer, the sink, the portable sinks, the masks, and possibly gloves and face shields. How do we start gathering that through our vendors so that we have that stockpiled somewhere, and then it's available, whatever size of your production is, we don't have to go look for it, or at least we have the context that we know that when we call them, it's not going to be 8 weeks out. So I know that I'm talking to a number of producers, they're starting to think about it. Our OSHA outreach specialist is looking into it along with one of our main vendors, Pacific Grip and Lighting, to just investigate that supply chain. And then the other supply chain is tests, right? And so we've been working with OMPA, and one of our board members is sort of set up a subcommittee of the task force to start. So they had already started before the crisis, or the beginning of the crisis, and they're picking up that work now in earnest and trying to track down what the resources are, what the state is saying, where the local health authorities, what they're saying as far as supply and testing. Again, when we get up and running and we know that it's going to be a crawl, how do we get people tested? Because that's going to make people feel obviously more secure.
Yeah, and that's
so another thing, Tim, if you don't mind,
yeah.
One of the things that's at the very top before production can even happen is what are insurance companies even going to let you go into production? So I think strategically, Oregon does sit in a place where we're a great place to film, we're a great place to work. Currently, we have low cases. And we're on a lockdown that, yes, a lot of people aren't happy about, but we may be proving that we know how to do this right, and we know how, and if we're proactive, we may be able to start to attract work and get work covered by insurance before other areas. Louisiana's a mess right now. Georgia's a mess right now. LA has a lot more population. So, there's potentially, if we all find the proper protocols and we all are trained and we all are prepared, and we may be able to actually come out of this a little bit better because we did do the work ahead of time and we were smart early on.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think that brings me to sort of Amy just posted a message to the group about where these sort of protocols will live and how to keep up with them. The short answer, Amy, is there is a set of protocols that we've done for the state that is sort of being reviewed just for final stuff now. It's probably going to be posted to the OMPA's site next week for people to take a look at. It's meant to be a baseline. So we've spent the last couple of weeks working with community members like Michelle and cdavid and the unions and guilds, as well as many other people, to put together both a concise and a comprehensive set of protocols. So I think many people know there's Lionsgate put ones out, and Sony put one out, and the EU put one out, and there's just coming fast and furious now. And so what we wanted to do is have a baseline set of protocols that we would want people to follow from a 2-person crew up to a 200-person crew, knowing that in most of those cases, there's going to be an overriding thing that comes on top, whether that's a union or whether that's a studio or whether that's an agency. They're probably going to have more that need to be done than what we have. But to Michelle's point, as a state, we want to say, look, we're here. We're ready when you are. Yes, there are some social distancing things that are still in place, but the governor has come out and said she has a 3-phase rollout. And as those 3 phases go on, we're ready to address that. And here are the safety issues that we expect at a minimum on each set. And we've designed it in a way where there's a 2-page tear sheet. So you can actually take these 2 pages on a small set and do those things, and you'll stay pretty safe. If you want, there's a department by department breakdown of protocols for hair and makeup, of protocols for wardrobe. So if you want to get much more detailed, that's there, but it's linked through PDFs. So it's only a 14-page document with a 2-page tear sheet, and then it has a link to about 60 pages of departmental stuff, as well as the IATSE protocols and the governor's protocols. So that will be on the OMPA's site, I think, next week. And if anybody wants to look at it and comment on it, you can do that through me or Lisa Chikala at the OMPA. And hopefully that'll set the stage, as Michelle said, for us to sort of feel like Oregon has a plan, we feel good, and we want to do this in the right way. And hopefully over the summer, we'll start to ease into this in a nice way.
And I would just add, Amy, that I've always, one of our main resources on there is the CDC's website and the and OSHA's website. So the protocols on there are available to everybody. And OSHA has a great website with how to set up a workplace, to be safe, to be COVID safe, and it basically reflects all. We've tried to input all of those things into the different elements of the protocols wherever we could directly, but as an overriding reference, we always defer to the CDC and OSHA.
Looks like we have one more question from David. Can everybody hear me okay? I keep getting a very thumbs up. Thumbs up, we're okay? Everybody can, okay. So David is asking, he said, production is slowing down significantly. Am I going out? Set changes will take twice as long. Productions will require more days and new crews. Is anybody talking about how we collaborate through financial impact?
Just missed the last of that.
Yeah, how we're collaborating.
Some are not. Some are making very independent. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going in and out, Amy. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Jump in, Tim. Take it away.
Anybody talking about how we collaborate through the financial impact of this? The short answer to that, David, is yes. I think many people are talking about the financial impact of this and what it will be on both a very small set and a very large set. And I think that impact is going to be first and foremost the time it takes. And I think like any, or we're actually a special industry in that we have over the years, and I think any filmmaker out there that's making their own movie just themselves or has worked with 10 people will know, you get a rhythm, you get a process, and you figure the process out, and efficiency starts to come because you start to figure out what works for you and what works for your production. And I think that's what's going to happen here, is there is going to be an efficiency that comes to these new protocols. Yes, it's going to be slower. Yes, it's going to be less, things are going to happen less rapidly, but there's going to be a new process. We're just going to have to go through that process to find that process. I think some of the studios are probably going to put a little more money into it on the bigger level. I think some of the agencies might put a little more money into it. I also think some of the content's going to change in order to work this way and get better content working this way. So you're going to see things that are going to use less extras or use less locations or be more on stage. And they're going to start scheduling and writing to work within this, as well as, so it's going to be a meet in the middle thing. There's going to be more money coming from one side in some cases, and then there's going to be things that just don't happen because they're too expensive and they can't get done. And then there's going to be things that are written primarily just for this arena. And I think that may be the opportunity zone, is how do you, as a filmmaker, do something that works really well with what we're now doing and works for your client or works for your audience, and works within the protocols that we now all have to work under and get a good product out of it. And that may be the sort of the Rubik's Cube opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and some of the things we've already seen change-wise are that commercials are being filmed in people's homes. Bits of, I think we're seeing more creative come out initially on the advertising side because the need is there and it's different. So I do know that I've seen auditions come out. There was one, they were looking for two sisters that were quarantined together, that one had like above average knowledge of how to use a camera. It was a SAG-AFTRA project. And so I know that some of that stuff has already been going on. I know that some smaller things have also gone on using families or using people who are already couples and different things. So I think that it's going to come from both sides. On some of it's going to be the creative thinks of, oh, how can we use something that is safer at this time? And from the other side of, for example, one things we're looking at is how many, for example, my husband and I we're both SAG-AFTRA, and we could do more close scenes together, or a family could for a commercial or for a scene. So we've been looking at our rosters of members to say how many families are in this situation where there's multiple actors within a family, or things like that. So scripts are going to change, and then also, I mean, some of the companies that do a lot of our work aren't suffering necessarily financially up front, Netflix, Amazon, because they're going to be needing new content. They're going to be hungry to go after new content, and one of the things you need to think about, they have all these things lined up that are on hold right now. Everyone's schedules are wackadoo. And, you know, it would be great if some areas we end up getting more production eventually, because other areas are trying to backlog and catch up from stuff that they have to get done for productions that are already in season 5 or season 7. So I'm hopeful about other opportunity. You know, I tend to be a glasses half full girl. When, you know, when the shit's hitting the fan, there's opportunity somewhere.
Yeah, and I think you're right, though, that there's going to be just as much opportunity by somebody saying, you know, Netflix saying, we're going to do this anyway, and we're going to put more money into it. And we realize it's going to be 10-hour shooting days. You're going to have an hour on either end to disinfect and check people in. We get that. And then there's going to be the middle ground where people are going to be like, it's just, this one's too difficult. We can't pull it off. And this one's, we're going to do something else. You know, it's going to be a case-by-case thing. And I think that's also going to be the case with how people are figuring out their process and actually making a safe set. That's going to be a project by project thing too, is where is the set? What kind of sets are you using? How many people are you? It's certainly going to be much easier for a 5-person crew shooting in one location with 2 actors to stay safe than it is for, you know, Shrill season 3 to stay safe. There's going to be a lot more moving parts. So it's going to be an economy of scale probably on that level. Any other questions out there? No? Well, I don't know that there's unless I'm missing anything, it's a nice day, and I think we've actually covered a great deal of stuff. So Michelle, cdavid, you guys got anything you want to add here?
I just think, let's be smart, let's be prepared and ready to roll, but ready to do it right. And I want to get that, because there was some talks of some people thinking we were trying to move too fast for the sake of moving fast, and no one is trying to do that. It is, let's move right and do what we need to do to get our people back to work safely, period.
Yeah, and that's going to start at
we're not doing it.
And that's going to start at the small production level. That's not, it's, you know, Shrill's not going to jump right in and be the first one out of the gate. It's going to be somebody doing a 5 or 6 or 7 or 10-person shoot and doing it well, and then we can all celebrate that. And I think if we do this one step at a time, you're right, we will become a destination for people to do this kind of work. And then Shrill and Chad and everything else will come back, which is what we want. All right. Well, Amy.
Yeah, I don't know
You're
that I'm
back.
gonna break up again.
You're
My internet connection is now unstable. So thank you if you can hear me. And I look forward to doing this again next week. Thank you to cdavid and Michelle, and as always, Tim in December. And we will be back this time. Same
All
right, guys.
Life. Right on, Kurt.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.